Good afternoon. I hope you're not tired yet. I want to talk to you this afternoon about boldness, but boldness as a regional state of mind. Boldness as a regional state of mind. You know, boldness has a kind of viral quality to it. One person's bold act can encourage others to join him or her. And one group's bold actions can spur complementary or supporting actions by other groups. But let me offer you a different kind of concept. We often want to think of boldness as daring or heroic acts. But quite as often, we don't even recognize or appreciate boldness except in retrospect. And so a different characterization might be, boldness is having a clear vision of the good that can come from a goal you have in mind and the courage of conviction to relentlessly pursue it. The good that can come from a goal that you have in mind, having that clear vision and having the relentless, tireless conviction to pursue it. You know, it's not a matter of knowing everything you need to know before you act. It's rather knowing enough, and based upon that knowledge, moving with courage despite the obstacles that might stand in the way. You know, kind of the opposite of boldness, we often want to say is timid. But I submit to you, another way to think of the opposite of boldness is being complacent. Being so satisfied, so content with what is and what exists, that we fail to see what more is needed and to ask what more is possible, that we are apathetic to that greater potential within us, individually and collectively. There's a song that kind of speaks to this, Glory Days by Bruce Springsteen. You know it? Do you know it? Yes. Oh, good. You want to sing it? Well, you don't want me to sing it. But let me paraphrase the chorus. It goes something like this. Glory days, well, they'll pass us by. Glory days in the wink of an eye. Glory days, glory days. Glory days are when we talk about or sing about the great things that we once did. And if we're not careful, it's where we peak and get stuck, rooted in the past, because we're scared or unwilling to push past and strive for the new frontier. So in that context, I want to say to you, it is time for Atlantans to get a clear vision and the conviction of what is necessary and what is possible to set a successful course for our future. It is time for us to begin to focus on the regional challenge, solutions to our regional challenges, which, if left unchecked, will block our potential to become a great 21st century city. Things such as regional transit, affordable, walkable communities, and world-class public education that's widely accessible, widely available. Regional transit, affordable, walkable communities, and world-class education that's widely available. Atlanta's always been a transportation town, but Atlanta's always been a bold town as well, in transportation and so many other ways. 5 Points, the place we call 5 Points, actually began as a stake in the ground, milepost zero, when surveyors marked the end of and the convergence of several railroads coming into the region at the same place. And that 1837 act marked the beginning of a place called Terminus that later became Atlanta. But instead of being the ending of something small, it was the beginning of something great. And Atlanta, as history unfolded, gave rise to some of the boldest dreams and boldest dreamers of the 20th century. Consider William Hartsfield, 1925. He convinces the Board of Aldermen of the city of Atlanta to buy a rundown racetrack to turn it into Atlanta Airfield. He had the awareness that the U.S. Postal Service was soon going to start delivering mail by air for the first time in the nation's history. And based on that knowledge, he had the clear belief and the unwavering conviction that, as he said it, the city that makes its port on this new ocean will own the future. The city that makes its port on this new ocean will own the future. How prophetic was that? In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, we created and then built out the MARTA rail system, one of 3 daring new urban mass transit systems in the nation at the time. We were way ahead of the game, and we were the envy of the nation. And in the 1990s, we dared to double our highway capacity through a program we called Freeing the Freeways. And along the way, we built this thing. 14 bridges, 5 levels spanning more than 90 feet in the air, the intersection of I-85 and I-285 that we fondly call Spaghetti Junction. Spaghetti Junction was one of the nation's earliest examples of a stacked interstate interchange, innovation. And now we are embarking on the redesign and reconstruction of a nearby interchange, I-285 and Georgia 400. And when it's completed, it will be the most expensive transportation project in our region's history. Maybe we'll call it Linguini Junction. What do you think? I'll keep my day job. But despite our past innovations and our current improvements, I submit to you that merely adding lanes and building better interchanges will no longer suffice for our ample mobility in the 21st century. No, if we want to be a vital, vibrant 21st century city, a workable city, we need to broaden our vision from cars and planes to cars and planes and trains. Transit, actually. And transit of all sorts, trains, buses, streetcars, and the like, must become a regional priority if we are to be strong in the future. You know, millennials, the young people amongst us, and I'm sure there's many of you here in the audience today, by and large, they don't like to drive as much as we used to, or as much as we liked to when I was growing up. They'd rather not own a car because they see it as an expensive asset that sits unutilized 90% of the time you own it. In a survey done last year, 50% of millennials said they would drive a whole lot less if they had realistic options to do so. And in a different survey, over 40% of millennials said they'd rather own a cell phone than a car. And even for those who would like to own a car, many cannot financially afford to do so. And speaking of financial, earlier this month actually, the Georgia General Assembly passed legislation that will add more funding for our transportation needs as a state. And it's a significant step forward, and that's great. However, it failed to do for transit what we would hope that they would do. And even though they've given local government some additional tools to raise additional funds, the fact of the matter is those tools are not sufficient enough or robust enough to create and support a regional transit system. We must get a sense of urgency. We must have a clear vision and the courage of conviction to believe that a regional transit system will greatly enhance our future mobility, strengthen our social connectedness, and strengthen our future economic competitiveness. If not now, when? Glory days, they're going to pass us by in the wink of an eye if we're not careful and determined. You know, over the next 25 years, we're going to have 3 million more people who will come to live here in Atlanta. They'll reside here, either born or move in. And how are we going to accommodate them all? Because we've spread out about as far as we can reasonably spread, don't you think? So the next phase of our growth as a region has to consist of a lot more infill development in existing communities. And a greater portion of our new residential development must have higher density to accommodate more people in the same places. And speaking of people, you know, when we age from children to adulthood, as children going to adulthood, we shoot up, experiencing growing pains for many of us, and then as maturity sets in, we spread out. I know I have, and I know that doesn't apply to anybody else in the room today. But our region, on the other hand, as a young region, it's spread out far and wide. And now, as it matures, it needs to grow up, so to speak. Denser, mixed income, mixed use, mixed generation communities are critical and vital for the future of Atlanta for many reasons, but I'll name two of them: millennials and retiring baby boomers. You know, those groups, many people in both of those groups increasingly want a type of community lifestyle that is less auto-dependent. They want to be able to walk or bike to get their shopping, dining, entertainment, medical, or other service needs. And that's a wonderful thing, but we don't have enough of those areas right now. 4% of our land area in this region consists of communities that can be considered walkable or on their way to becoming walkable, 4%. But that 4% contains 29% of all of our commercial development in the region and a staggering 69% of all of our office development, where most of our jobs are. But they only have 7% of our region's residential development. And so our challenge as we grow in the future is to get more dense, more residents in these livable centers that we call them, or walk-ups if you prefer, walkable urban places. And we must do so in a way that is both workable and affordable for old and young alike. And speaking of young, the millennials, the leading edge of them, are starting to have families and have babies. And as their children grow, it is paramount for us to improve public education. Public education in this region needs to become world-class and widely available. No longer can we afford to let the accident of a child's place of birth or their home determine the likelihood of their educational success, or more importantly, the lack thereof. Let me share these numbers with you. If you start with 100 ninth graders as an average cohort in Metro Atlanta, in 4 years, only 72 will graduate from high school on time. And of those 72, only 54 will continue their education after high school, either by getting some kind of a certification, a 2-year associate's degree, or a 4-year bachelor's degree. But 2 years after high school, of those 54, only 38 will have obtained that certification, earned their associate's degree, or be on track to earn their bachelor's degree. 38 out of 100. What's happening to the other 62? The other 62%. And even among the 38, all of them are not going to have skills that make them employable for livable wage jobs. Real number. At the depth of the recession in 2012, just passed here in the region, for every unemployed person with a bachelor's degree, we had 1.6 job openings. Every unemployed college graduate, almost 2 job openings per. So why do we have such high unemployment? It's because the skill sets that they have do not meet the skills that are needed increasingly in the 21st century economy. As I stand and speak to you right now, the skill set that is highest demand in this region is software development. Over 10,000 jobs demanding and needing software development skills. But many of our people, young and old, aren't trained in the kind of coding to master all those various programming languages. We can do better than this, people. And for the sake of our children and for the sake of our own future, we must do better than this. You know, Atlanta has had a long, proud tradition of innovative and bold leaders. I mentioned Hartsfield, but also men like Mayor Ivan Allen Jr. and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who insisted on standing on the right side of civil rights history despite the scorn and the pushback they often received. Like Mayor Maynard Jackson, who insisted on giving women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses access to city contracting opportunities, when essentially for hundreds of years before then, they'd been shut out. Men like Mayor Andrew Young and Billy Payne, who together had the audacity the audacity to imagine and believe that the world would be willing to come to little old Atlanta for the biggest sporting event in human history, and that we could pull it off. That was bold. Like Shirley Clark Franklin, who decided not to kick the can down the road anymore and put her political capital on the line to raise the money to rebuild our long-neglected sewer systems that were literally crumbling under our feet for decades. Like Ryan Gravel, a young man who dared to imagine a new way of living and developing along our long-abandoned railroad lines, the place where the city started. And in the process, it led to the creation of the Atlanta Beltline, arguably the nation's biggest, most transformative urban redevelopment project in a generation. So the legacy of these and other bold leaders, their legacy for us, is that we must now exert our own boldness. We must get a very clear sense of vision and a courage of conviction to do the things that we know are necessary and possible to assure Atlanta's future. You know, I'm convinced that we're no longer going to be led by a handful of heroic or memorable people. Our world has become much more complex, much more connected, and certainly transforming and moving much more rapidly than ever before. And so it's going to take a collective leadership group, a team, to secure our future. And with that, I say, all of us, each and every person in this room, must become a member of a bold leadership cohort that will do the things to set in place what we need to be sufficient and secure into the future. Regional transit, walkable communities that are affordable for young and old alike, world-class, widely available public education. We have the energy. We have the ability. Atlanta need not become a glory days city, but now we need to harness the collective will to make the bold moves that will assure that we are as remarkable in the 21st century as we've already been in our remarkable past. Bold regional leadership. It's our time. Thank you.